Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. I rise to support the Honourable Minister of Finance on the motion before this House and to make a few remarks in support of him, not with reference to the details which he is the master of, but really to look at the record of how we have got here with reference to the applicable law. The resolution before you, Madam Speaker, is clear. It references sections 24 and 25 of the Exchequer and Audit Act, and it bears emphasis that sections 24 and 25 of the Exchequer and Audit Act require the Auditor General, as one might expect, to examine and audit papers and documents that are sent to her under this Act. Madam Speaker, Section 24 of the Act requires the Treasury to close the account showing fully the financial position of Trinidad and Tobago to be transmitted to the Auditor General within a period of 4 months after 30th of September in each year, or such longer period thereafter as Parliament may by resolution appoint. So as a general proposition, if the Treasury proposed to submit the accounts for whatever reason after the 31st of January, that is to say, after the expiry of 4 months from the 30th of September, then the time would necessarily have to be extended by the Parliament. In this case, we know on the information put before this House by the Honourable Minister of Finance that the Treasury submitted the accounts on time, 31st of January 2024, but later discovered errors and brought those errors to the attention of the High Constitutional Office of the Auditor General of Trinidad and Tobago. Madam Speaker, the Treasury was obviously bound to do so, because its obligation was to provide the Auditor General with accounts showing fully the financial position of Trinidad and Tobago, and that it had discovered that the accounts which were submitted were indeed not full and did not represent the financial position of Trinidad and Tobago. The understatement arose, as we know from what the Minister of Finance has told us, as a result of an error which emanated from the new electronic check-in system of the Central Bank of Trinidad and Tobago and other aspects of that system. It is the Auditor General's duty under Section 9 of the Act to audit those accounts. And to that end, she has the power under Section 10(1) of the Act to call upon any officer for any explanation and information which the Auditor General may require in order to permit her to discharge her duties. And that is a continuing obligation that subsists until the deadline date for the submission of her report to the Parliament. It is her duty equally under Section 10(1)(b) to authorize any officer to conduct an inquiry, examination, or audit, and under Section 10(1)(c) to send for and have custody of any books, accounts, vouchers, and papers, and in any wise concerning the public accounts. I repeat that, under 10(1)(c), in the currency of the period when the documentation has been provided for her, continuing up to the point at which she submits her report to Parliament, she may send for and have custody of any books or accounts, vouchers, and papers, and in any wise concerning the public accounts. Implicit, therefore, in the performance of the Auditor General's power is the possibility that during the course of her audit, errors may be discovered and noted, and corrections accordingly made where deemed necessary. Madam Speaker, the plain, ordinary Oxford Dictionary meaning of audit is an official examination and verification of financial accounts, especially by an independent body. That is the purpose of an audit, an examination and verification of financial accounts. You don't receive Treasury accounts from the Treasury, the statement of revenue, put it into a book and present that to the Parliament as your audited account. It is your duty to examine those accounts, and if of your own volition you discover there are errors, you are mandated by the relevant sections of the Audit and Exchequer Act to go after the source of the errors, to verify, and thereafter to submit a true account. And equally, if it is brought to your attention by someone else that that which was submitted on time has erroneous material in it, it is your duty to receive the information, to demonstrate the error so as to correct your audit and present a proper audit report. It really is ABC. It's no more complex than that. And just as much as the Treasury is obligated to present the full financial position of Trinidad and Tobago, the Auditor General is required through her audit to determine whether the full financial position has been represented, so that if it were to be discovered during the audit that the accounts submitted understated or overstated revenue or expenditure, the Auditor General is duty-bound to carry out the necessary corrections. That's a statutory responsibility. There was, let me emphasize, Madam Speaker, there was and is nothing untoward about the Treasury.
I am really having difficulty. Okay, so that the long commentary that is happening, members can go out, continue the conversation, and come back in. Attorney General.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. There was and is nothing untoward, as I was saying, about the Treasury notifying the Auditor General of errors in the accounts and providing her with information which would have allowed corrections to be made. No extension of time by a resolution of Parliament is required in those circumstances because the accounts had already been submitted on time. But we will not spend more time on that, Madam Speaker, because we are here today with the prudence of the Minister of Finance to ask this House for its imprimatur to give that extension so that that which necessarily has to be done will be done correctly. You have heard from the Honourable Minister of Finance, Madam Speaker, the cause of the error. Through the diligence of the Treasury Division of the Ministry of Finance, those errors were brought to the attention of the Auditor General well before the deadline of the 31st of April 2024. B, you've heard from the Auditor General the concerted efforts made by the officers of the Treasury Division to deliver the corrective material, including by in-person visits to the Office of the Auditor General and being denied entry. Being denied, officers of the Ministry of Finance, Treasury Division, seeking to go to the Auditor General with the corrective information, were denied entry to the Office of the Auditor General to provide the corrective information. So alarming was the conduct of the office holder of this high constitutional office that the Minister of Finance came to the Attorney General for advice, which I gave, including by the provision of two eminent counsel, one senior and one very experienced senior junior counsel, which advice led to a pre-action protocol letter being written and delivered to the Auditor General on the 15th of April 2024. And without going into it in detail, Madam Speaker, I want to place on record, it's a 6-page letter, and I want to place on record that the pre-action protocol letter, written on behalf of the Minister of Finance and settled by senior counsel, went into the chronology that was being put before the Auditor General to demonstrate the time when the report was, the financial statement was submitted, firstly, 31st of January, and then the efforts which were made thereafter to ask the Auditor General to perform her statutory constitutional duties. So the letter proceeds to recount with attachments to it that in the week of the 26th of February, the error was discovered, the material understatement, that during the period from late February 2024 to early 2024, personnel from the Treasury Division and the Budget Division and the Inland Revenue Division carried out investigations. Thereafter, on the 25th of March, an attempt was made to communicate with the Auditor General by the Ministry of Finance. On the 26th of March, a further attempt was made. On the 27th of March, a further attempt was made. Thereafter, on the 28th of March, another attempt was made because the Permanent Secretary of the Ministry of Finance was not receiving any response from the Auditor General in response to letters being written to the Auditor General. On the 28th of March, the Permanent Secretary sent a memorandum by email to the Auditor General explaining the error, the provenance of the error, and the significance of the grave implications if the error was not corrected. On the 5th of April, the Permanent Secretary submitted a further memorandum to the Auditor General, pointing out the error that emanated from the Central Bank of Trinidad and Tobago. On the 8th of April, all of this is narrated in the pre-action protocol letter. On the 8th of April, the Permanent Secretary sent a further memorandum to the Auditor General. On the 8th of April again, the Controller of Accounts sent an email with a compact disc containing the corrected information to the Auditor General. On the morning of the 9th of April, further attempts are made by the Ministry of Finance to approach the Auditor General. Up to this point, the information is not being received. All of this being narrated in the pre-action protocol letter. Attempts were made to call the Auditor General. Calls went on the 9th of April. Calls went unanswered. On the 11th of April, the officers, on the 9th of April, the officers went to the office of the Auditor General. On arrival, they were told there was no one there to receive the items, that is to say, the compact disc with the corrected information, and they should return on the 11th of April. They returned on the 11th of April, and the Assistant Auditor General told the officers of the Ministry of Finance that he was instructed by the Auditor General to accept only the compact disc containing the original public accounts, but not to accept the compact disc containing the amended public accounts. It is nothing short of bizarre. At the request of the Auditor General, the three officers then met with the senior legal officer in the Auditor General's department. The senior legal officer excused herself, said she was going to consult with the Auditor General, came back and said to the Ministry of Finance persons that she was instructed to accept only the compact disc containing the electronic copy of the public accounts based on the original revenue statement, but not to accept the compact disc containing the amended public accounts. That was the basis on which an 8-page pre-action protocol letter was written to the Auditor General, asking her to please receive the corrected information and cautioning her of the grave implications that would befall the economy of Trinidad and Tobago if she proceeded to publish a report based on information which, to her knowledge, was erroneous. Madam Speaker, the Auditor General replied to the pre-action protocol letter on the 17th of, beg your pardon, on the 17th of April. And among the things that she emphasized in her reply was that she quoted section 116, subsection 6 of the Constitution. And that section, subsection states, in the exercise of his functions under this Constitution, the Auditor General shall not be subject to the direction or control of any other person or authority. And at the end of her statement, her letter, she continues to decline. Madam Speaker, it is remarkable that we could find ourselves in the year 2024 in Trinidad and Tobago, an evolved democracy, to have this kind of conduct from a senior high constitutional office holder. On the 17th of April, 2024, Madam Speaker, I received from the Auditor General at my office of Attorney General and Ministry of Legal Affairs a letter dated the 17th of April 2024 by which the Auditor General requested a legal opinion from me as Attorney General on sections 24 and 25 of the Exchequer and Audit Act. Madam Speaker, through you, I can assure the public of this country and this House that I referred that letter to another eminent senior counsel for advice. As a result of the advice received by letter of the 19th of April 2024, addressed to the Auditor General and signed by me, I wrote to the Auditor General in these terms. Dear Auditor General, request for advice. I acknowledge receipt of your letter dated the 17th of April 2024 with attachments, requesting my advice on whether the Auditor General is required to consider the amended statements referred to in your said letter. In light of the provisions of sections 24 and 25 of the Exchequer and Audit Act, consistent with my duty under the Constitution, and as you are aware, I am already advising the Honourable Minister of Finance on this very matter. I refer to the pre-action protocol letter dated the 16th of April, which is one of the attachments to your said letter to me. In the circumstances, it would be inappropriate for me to render any advice to you on this matter. I recommend that with all appropriate urgency, you should retain independent counsel to give you such advice. I give the undertaking that as Attorney General, I am prepared to pay reasonable fees incurred by you as Auditor General for the retention and obtaining of that independent advice. Sincerely yours. It is not for me to say, Madam Speaker, nor to speculate whether the Auditor General obtained such independent advice. Suffice it to say that in less than a week of receipt of my response to her, and 6 days before the 31st of April deadline, 30th of April deadline, books arrive in this House and in the other place purporting to be the report of the Auditor General. Madam Speaker, in her response of the 15th of April to the pre-action protocol letter, because the Auditor General responded, in the final paragraph, the Auditor General stated, the Ministry of Finance is free to submit an original and signed dated letter to the Auditor General by 12 noon on April 16, 2024, recalling the public accounts previously submitted and dated January 31st, confirming the statement of declaration and certification previously provided as inaccurate, and providing the revised public accounts will be published and providing the revised public accounts. And this letter, says the Auditor General, will be published in the Auditor General's report. This is the response of the Auditor General to the pre-action protocol letter. The challenge, therefore, which is presented in this very bizarre situation that we find ourselves in, Madam Speaker, arises from the fact that A, the Auditor General has refused, in flagrant contravention of her statutory and constitutional responsibilities under the Constitution and the Exchequer Act, to accept the corrective material from the Treasury Division of the Ministry of Finance as part of her audit. Secondly, she has refused because she appears to have wrongly relied on Section 116(6) of the Constitution, which states, and I quote it again, Auditor General has already quoted it twice in correspondence to the Minister of Finance and to me. In the exercise of his functions under the Constitution, the Auditor General shall not be subject to the direction or control of any other person or authority. Her senior legal officer actually referred to this subsection and put the words "emphasis mine" after those words were placed in bold font. And C, the Auditor General has required the Treasury to recall the accounts which had been submitted in time and to resubmit amended accounts certifying them to be correct. The doing of that, which the Auditor General has requested the Ministry of Finance to do, would give the appearance, Madam Speaker, that the accounts were submitted late, when in fact what happened was that they were submitted on time, but then later corrected. That is a remarkable, bizarre situation we find ourselves in. And let me be clear, whether we were before this House on this resolution, this motion today, and I accept we are here through the prudence of the Minister of Finance, or not, it would not be unlawful for the Auditor General to perform her audit according to the Oxford English Dictionary meaning of that word audit, on the basis of the corrected, resubmitted accounts, which she refused to accept. The accounts were submitted on time and later corrected. They were not submitted outside of the time limit. And that brings me to a point that I had intended to make, Madam Speaker, in the other place, on a debate that is still taking place there. And the Leader of the Opposition advised herself today, as the opposition seems to continue to advise itself wrongly, on the so-called separation of powers. We are in an unfortunate situation in this country in which office holders do not understand what the separation of powers means. Separation of powers does not mean that one branch of government or one high constitutional office is not allowed to speak to another branch. And I can do no better than to quote from a quotation out of a Court of Appeal judgment of this country, which has been approved in the Privy Council for many years since, and that is in the Court of Appeal decision, Appeal number 10 of 2004, Director of Personnel Administration and Police Service Commission against Cooper, Barbosa, and others. And I quote from Chief Justice Sharma at the time in January 2005 at paragraphs 28 to 29 of his dictum. In all constitutions based on the Westminster system of government, there is in operation the doctrine of the separation of powers. By this doctrine, the autonomy of each branch of government is presumed to be immune from undue encroachment from any others. Thus, the legislature, executive, and judiciary operate in an environment which is presumed free from influence. While, and this is the critical part of Chief Justice Sharma, while in the popular sense, it may be convenient to divide the powers of government into specific spheres, in practical reality, such rigid classification is neither desirable nor possible. On the basis of the doctrine as initially formulated by French jurist Montesquieu, what is desired is not that the different organs should have no influence or control over the acts of each other, but rather, and I emphasize this from the judgment of Chief Justice Sharma, but rather that neither should exercise the whole power of the other. You are permitted to speak to each other. The Auditor General is required by her enabling legislation, the Audit and Exchequer Act, to conduct an audit during the period until she hands in her audit report. And until she does that, the Ministry of Finance is lawfully entitled to bring to her attention errors that were made with respect to a finance statement that was delivered to her on time, and to show her so that she does her statutory duty and her constitutional duty correctly where the errors are, so that she may correct those errors and present a full, true report to this House, not a purported report. I therefore stand here today, Madam Speaker, to support the prudence of the Honourable Minister of Finance to bring this resolution, notwithstanding the fact that the Statement of Revenue was correctly submitted in time in January 2024. I regret that this newly appointed Auditor General, in her first year of putting an audit report before this House, should start off with a purported report and appears to be misadvising herself. And if she has sought legal advice, I recommend she change attorneys and obtain competent legal advice. I thank you.
Leader of the House.